The recent murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan showcases a disturbing level of premeditation and planning by the alleged killer. The perpetrator meticulously prepared for the crime, demonstrated a calculated approach that included tracking the victim's routines to know precisely when he would exit the building. The killer had a well thought out escape plan, which appears to have fallen apart once the shooting started. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil and our continuing coverage on the murder of Brian Thompson, that United Healthcare CEO who was murdered in Midtown Manhattan. Hey, if you'd like, you can hit the like and subscribe button. I'd certainly like it, and make sure you share us with your friends. Now, the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson's killer, appeared to have a well thought out escape plan, which involved an e-bike that was strategically positioned nearby, in my opinion. I suspect the killer placed the bike in a secure location hours before the attack, if not the night before. That way he could go back to his hostel, charge the battery for that e-bike, which we see him holding at 5 o'clock in the morning on the day of the shooting, and then get on the subway and make his way down to the Hilton. I would also suspect, based on the level of organization that he shows, that he had a cable and lock on the bike, and I'll bet he even went over and checked that bike before the shooting occurred to make sure it was still there and that his escape plan was in place. Now, we have news reports, again, that killer was holding the bike battery around 5 o'clock in the morning, which all fits together nicely with the idea of pre-planning and premeditation, all of it pointing to his organizational level. However, despite the initial sophistication of his plan, the execution revealed a critical flaw that kind of unraveled the scheme. You see, as the shooter was attempting to fire his weapon, it jammed, a malfunction that disrupted the precision of the operation. Now, in my opinion, during that moment of failure, the killer shifted from being highly organized to chaotically disorganized. In the panic that followed, the killer ejected rounds that were unspent onto the ground at the crime scene. He also fled the area hastily, and when fleeing the scene, according to news reports, he apparently dropped a mobile phone that he had been carrying, along with some other evidence that was collected by investigators. These errors may prove to give the investigators the crucial leads they need to identifying and apprehending this predator. So for a deeper dive into the implications of this case and my analysis, I want to share with you a few minutes from an interview I did on Court TV with Vinnie Politan and my co-panelist, psychotherapist Siobhan Scott.
Let me bring in our guest who's going to help us profile this killer. Joining me, retired police commander, host of the podcast Profiling Evil, Mike King, and psychotherapist and author of The Minds of Mass Killers, Siobhan Scott, is with us as well. You know, Mike, when we look at the actual murder itself, he looks so calm, right? But the gun, there's a little problem with the gun, but the way he stood and walked and the way he left, he seemed very, very calm. He apparently used some sort of suppressor or silencer on it. What are your thoughts about the profile of this suspect?
I think, Vinny, that first and foremost, there was clearly planning and premeditation that went into this, that there was a great deal of time. Not only the fact that we now know that he spent up to 10 days there in the city, probably walking the route that he was going to take, figuring out the timing of things, getting everything figured out with that e-bike. But then he's really what you would consider to be just an organized killer at this particular point. I think he's incredibly proficient with the weapon but not a professional, if that makes sense. And the question becomes, was he trying to clear that weapon? And that shows the proficiency that he truly is clearing the weapon. He takes a stance that would say that he's had some kind of training in how to shoot a weapon, how to keep target acquisition, how to move and be clearing a jam and get that target acquisition. But then we see, I think, as he starts to have problems with that weapon and that gun starts to jam, we see him start to become a little more disorganized, because this thing that he's been fantasizing about isn't coming together the way he had hoped. The victim isn't just falling and dying immediately, and he's having to move up and try to ensure that he's successful. And then we see that disorganization as he flees the area, drops his phone, starts to leave other pieces of evidence behind that kind of are the things that are going to hopefully bring this case together. But he walks into it, I think, very proficient, and he walks into it very prepared. But then, like many of these kinds of crimes, he falls apart when things start happening. There has been a lot of discussion about the inscription on the unspent bullets that were ejected from that jammed weapon and recovered at the crime scene. The investigators noted that the casings had the words delay, deny, and depose inscribed on the sides of them. Siobhan Scott had some great comments that I want to include.
Siobhan Scott, I want to put a couple more things into the mix here. One thing that I think is huge that everyone's talking about are these magic marker inscriptions on the casings. Deny, defend, depose. A lot of people are talking about the book, Delay, Deny, Defend, which is about insurance companies, why they don't pay, and what you can do about it, right? These are kind of words in the industry. Also, the suspect's potential backpack, and this is the backpack a lot of people think he actually used, and it's not a cheap one. It's like a $250 backpack on sale, the potential backpack. It's a designer backpack. People are talking about that. What are your thoughts about what's motivating this killer? What's the profile of this killer? Is this a personal grudge? Is this someone, an activist, who's going after the industry, and this CEO is a symbol of the industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Mike completely. What I see is a bold, confident younger man, probably very intelligent, who's incredibly comfortable with firearms. But I think he's driven by some kind of sense of social justice. He sees himself as an avenger. And is that motivated by anger because something happened personally to him or someone that he loves? That's quite possible. We all know people who have had problems with insurance company authorizing treatment that they need. So that certainly could have been a catalyst for it. But he's also someone that may be kind of an intense person and be driven by a lot of extremist ideologies. So in that way, making a bigger societal statement. But he's apparently willing to sacrifice himself and sacrifice his freedom to give a message that he thinks is ultimately going to help society. And we're definitely seeing that kind of buzz on the internet with people calling for violent uprising against insurance companies now. I mean, it's kind of insane what this has unleashed. And one of my concerns is, of course, copycat crimes, because when you get something like this that's really shocking, it taps into rage that other people are feeling, and then other people go out and take up weapons.
Well, this case provides a stark lens into the psychology of a potential killer who saw himself, in my opinion, as a vigilante seeking retribution against a perceived corporate greedster. When examining the profile of such a predator, certain characteristics and motivations emerge, offering insight into their mindset and background. And again, this is only one theory based on a whole bunch of information that we're lacking. But the first thing I want to talk about is the nobody profile. This type of individual may live a mundane or an unremarkable life, marked by a lack of recognition, personal achievement, or societal impact. They might feel invisible in their everyday experience and existence, working in a job that lacks prestige or failing to build meaningful personal relationships. This perceived anonymity can foster a simmering resentment, as they believe they are undervalued or overlooked by the world. Now, it also might be somebody who was hurt and very closely tied to this organization. And that goes back to my earlier video where we talked about the Department of Justice investigation, the cyber attack on the company, and other kinds of problems that might have come up in personalities and relationships within the organization. The next thing I want to talk about, though, is motivations for this vigilante justice. Because in cases like this, the perpetrator will often construct a narrative where they're not just committing a crime, but rather they're executing justice. They might see the victim here, a high-profile CEO, as a symbol of the systematic injustice, greed, or exploitation. In their mind, the act of murder becomes a grand statement, an attempt to leave an indelible mark on the world by targeting a figure who represents everything they despise. And I'll tell you what, I'm seeing some really disturbing kinds of comments coming out from people who are expressing even their own personal feelings about what's going on here. A man was murdered. I don't know that you can do anything to justify in your minds that that was appropriate in this particular circumstance, although I acknowledge and I don't want to minimize the fact that there are a lot of people out there who have been financially or otherwise hurt by decisions made in corporate healthcare. It's just a fact, I guess. But the third thing is this willing to sacrifice. When you find somebody with such motivations, the allure of becoming infamous or remembered often outweighs the consequence of their actions. They might rationalize the potential loss of their freedom or life as a necessary cost for achieving their perceived mission. The act itself is less about the victim and more about the killer's desire to break free from obscurity and be known as the shooter, even if their fame is infamous. The last thing I want to talk about is a comparison to other cases, this copycats. Such individuals have no prior criminal history or any history of violence, and it makes them appear pretty unassuming. They're not career criminals or members of organized crime. Instead, their actions stem from deeply personal grievances, often fueled by societal narratives or perceived injustices that they amplify through their own distorted worldview. So the question becomes, is this the kind of killer we're looking for? I mean, there's no question these characteristics suggest that investigators should consider the possibility that the perpetrator is not a professional hitman or even a member of a higher conspiracy. Instead, they might just be somebody that has a history of expressing anti-corporate sentiment or resentment toward perceived societal inequalities. They might be a person with an unremarkable job or living situation with limited social ties. They may be someone that you realize had a sudden departure from routine behaviors in the days or weeks leading up to this murder. And they may have possibly written or recorded digitally manifestos, posts, or messages outlining their grievances and motivations. You know, the tragic irony of such cases lies in the killer's belief that the act will somehow grant them significance, when in reality, it often reinforces their status as an outlier, someone who only resorted to violence because they felt powerless to achieve their goals through legitimate means. This desperate need for acknowledgement through destructive means speaks to the psychological torment underlying their decision-making processes. So by considering these traits, law enforcement might be in a better position to profile the individual who's responsible for the murder of Brian Thompson, a calculated yet deeply personal crime. Let's catch this final part of the interview.
Yeah, Mike, that is so powerful what Siobhan said, avenger. I like the use of that word because he's sending a message, right? This isn't just I'm gonna take someone out and try to. No, I'm gonna take someone out, and it comes with a very strong message attached, Mike.
Yeah, I love when I'm on with Siobhan because of her insights. The thing that I think is interesting here, Vinny, is that imagine having this could be a guy who's a nobody in life, and this all of a sudden gives him legacy. It gives him a stake in the sand, a way to be remembered, like we see with school shooters and other kinds of people. So we can't get tunnel vision on this thing. We can't think it's a professional hitman. We can't think that it's somebody who's angry about what was going on with the DOJ investigation or a disgruntled employee. We have to just let the facts start to come in and let that allow us to develop the theories and really come up with a solid case on this thing. And I think that's what the police department is doing. And when you look at this guy, he's also going to be a guy that the people are going to say was very charismatic. You loved having a Coke with, but I suspect they're going to say once you get to know him, there was something a little off that made you step away from a close relationship. Well, as we wrap up this discussion, it's critical to emphasize that this is only one of many possible theories regarding the Midtown Manhattan murder of Brian Thompson. My observations are based solely on the information that's available in the public right now. Law enforcement undoubtedly possesses much more information, more comprehensive evidence, and more intelligence that's guiding their ongoing investigation. So all of us have to resist the urge to leap to conclusions prematurely. Remember, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, through his iconic character Sherlock Holmes, he wisely cautioned us against theorizing without sufficient data, and you've heard me say it many times before. He said, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist the facts to suit the theories, instead of the theories to suit the facts." Hey, thanks for joining us on this conversation here at Profiling Evil. To stay updated, watch out for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, please make sure you're checking out Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And for even more insights, visit our website at profilingevil.com, where you can sign up for our exclusive digital newsletter, the BOLO. BOLO stands for Be on the Lookout, and the only way you're going to get it is by going over there and signing up. And I promise you, I will never sell or give away your contact information, which is only your email address, so I can send you the newsletter. Folks, if you found this content valuable, please give us a thumbs up, share us with your friends, and subscribe for more information. Make sure you have those notifications turned on. Thanks so much for your continued support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.